You make coffee the same way every morning. Kettle on, 2 scoops in the French press. 4 minutes while you stand at the counter and look at nothing in particular. It's automatic now. Your hand knows where the mugs are without looking. Your body knows how long 4 minutes feels. Tonight the apartment is quiet. Your roommate's visiting her parents for the weekend. Outside, a siren moves down Ashland Avenue and fades into the distance. The radiator clicks, but doesn't catch. It does that sometimes. You put the kettle on, even though it's evening, even though you probably won't sleep well if you drink it now. You think about the scholarship sometimes, the one you didn't take 6 years ago. You wonder who that version of you would have become, what her days would look like, whether she'd be happier. You work at a housing nonprofit on the north side, grant writing mostly, updating spreadsheets that track outcomes you rarely see, answering emails that feel important until you send them and realize they're not. Your desk faces a parking lot. There's a small tree someone planted years ago, before you started. It bloomed white in early May. You watched it happen over the course of a week. The flowers lasted maybe 8 days, then a storm came through and scattered them across the asphalt. The office is 7 people. Your boss means well, but forgets things. Your name sometimes, which meetings she scheduled, that she already asked you to handle the same task yesterday. There's a coffee maker that only works if you hold the button down the entire time. You've learned to time it, 2 minutes and 30 seconds for a full cup. You stand there with your finger on the button and think about nothing. Most days you eat lunch at your desk. Leftovers in containers you wash in the small bathroom sink. Sometimes you walk to the Korean place 2 blocks over and get sundubu. The owner started recognizing you a few months ago. She adds extra banchan now without asking. More kimchi, an extra egg, sometimes a piece of fish cake. You haven't thanked her directly. You're worried it would make it stop. The work matters, probably. You help people find housing. You write reports that justify funding for programs that keep families from losing their apartments. But you're several steps removed from the actual impact. You type numbers into databases. You copy and paste language from old grants into new ones. You attend meetings where people talk about metrics and benchmarks and strategic priorities. Your coworker Maria does direct services. She meets with families. She knows their names and their kids' names and which schools they're trying to get into. Sometimes she tells you stories, and you feel envious of the clarity. She knows when she's helped someone. You just know when a spreadsheet is complete. After work, you take the Red Line south. The evening train smells like wet coats and energy drinks, and sometimes weed. You stand near the doors even though there are seats because you've learned the doors are closer to the exit at Fullerton. You watch the tunnel lights blur past and let your mind empty. The walk from the station to your apartment is 3 blocks. In winter, it's brutal. In spring, like now, it's almost pleasant. You pass the same buildings every day. The corner store with the cat that sits in the window. The house with the garden that's starting to come up. Tomato cages already in place even though it's too early for tomatoes. Your apartment is the second floor of a 3-flat. 2 bedrooms, kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in at once. The bathroom sink drips. You keep meaning to fix it. Your roommate works nights at a bar in Wicker Park. You see her maybe twice a week, passing in the kitchen. She leaves notes on the counter about groceries or whose turn it is to buy toilet paper. You write back. Neither of you knows much about the other's actual life. She doesn't know what you do for work. You don't know her last name. You cook simple meals. Pasta with whatever vegetables looked okay at the store. Stir fry with frozen broccoli. Eggs and toast when you can't think of anything else. You eat on the couch with a show you've seen before because it doesn't require attention. The window stays open even when it's cold. You like the sound of traffic. It makes the apartment feel less empty. Some nights you read. You have a stack of books by your bed that grows faster than you finish them. You keep buying more anyway. At a bookstore on Milwaukee Avenue that stays open late. You walk the aisles and pull things off shelves based on covers, based on first sentences, based on nothing. You bring them home and add them to the stack. It feels like optimism, or at least the performance of it. Last week you finished one, a novel about a woman who moves to Japan to teach English. You stayed up until 2 in the morning reading the last 100 pages. When you finished, you felt hollow. Not because it was sad, because it was about someone doing something and you're just here. Weekends you meet friends for brunch in Logan Square. The same place every time. Good hash browns, terrible acoustics, a wait even though you arrive right when they open. You talk about work and dating apps and whether anyone's actually going to that wedding in August. The conversation loops the same way every time. Everyone's fine, everyone's tired, everyone's thinking about changing jobs, but no one actually does. Your friend Katie got engaged last month. She showed you the ring at brunch and everyone screamed, and you screamed too. You felt happy for her. You also felt a gap open up. Not jealousy exactly, just awareness that her life is moving in a direction and yours is staying still. You've dated here and there, nothing that stuck. A guy from a book club who talked too much about Murakami and didn't ask you a single question about yourself. A woman you met at your friend's birthday who texted constantly for 2 weeks and then disappeared without explanation. Someone from the nonprofit world who seemed perfect on paper, same values, same interests, same taste in restaurants, and felt like absolutely nothing in person. You don't know what you're looking for. Or maybe you do, and it's just not here, and that's the problem. Your parents ask when you're coming home to visit. You say soon, but soon stretches into months. They don't push anymore. They used to. Your mom would call every Sunday and ask about your plans and when she could expect you. Now she just tells you about your younger brother's new job, your cousin's baby, who's selling their house, and who's getting divorced. You feel guilty about it. You should visit more. It's only a 4-hour drive. But going home means answering questions about your life, and you don't have good answers. You're 28 and working at a nonprofit that pays $38,000 a year. You're single. You live with a roommate you barely know. You're fine, but fine isn't a story anyone wants to hear. Spring in Chicago feels fragile this year. The trees are budding, but the wind still has edges. You wore a jacket this morning and regretted it by noon. The light comes earlier now. It catches the dust on your bedroom window and makes everything look softer than it is. There are tulips coming up in the yard of the house next door. Someone planted them in neat rows, red and yellow. They're about halfway open. You watch them from your window when you're getting dressed in the morning. You've been watching them for a week now. You wonder if the person who planted them thinks about them as much as you do. You have friends here, good people, people who show up when you ask them to. But there's a gap between the life you're living and the life you thought you'd be living by now. Not a huge gap, just enough to notice. Just enough that some nights you lie in bed and think about all the small decisions that led you here and wonder which one was the turning point. At night, you scroll through your phone, other people's vacations, engagement announcements, someone's new apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. You double tap and keep scrolling. It's reflex more than anything. You're not even paying attention. Sometimes you stand at your kitchen counter in the morning, waiting for the coffee to steep, and the 4 minutes feel longer than they should, like you're waiting for something else to start. If you'd said yes to the scholarship, you would have left in August, 6 years ago. You would have packed everything into your car. Your mom would have cried at the house even though you were driving, not flying. Your dad would have checked your tire pressure twice and given you a AAA card and made you promise to call if anything happened. The program was in Boston, film preservation, a graduate degree you'd never heard of until your professor mentioned it senior year. Full funding, a stipend that would have been more than you make now. Access to archives most people never get to see. You almost said yes. You had the acceptance letter on your desk for 3 weeks. You read it maybe 50 times. You looked up apartments in Boston. You Googled the program. You told your parents you were thinking about it, but you didn't go. You can't remember exactly why anymore. At the time, it felt complicated. You had reasons. You'd been dating someone, and it felt serious even though it wasn't. You had a job offer here, at the nonprofit, and it seemed like the responsible choice. Your parents were relieved when you told them you were staying. They didn't say it directly, but you could hear it in your mom's voice. Now the reasons feel thin. The relationship ended 4 months later. The job pays poverty wages and makes you feel like you're typing in circles. If you'd gone, you would have driven east on I-90. 15 hours with too much coffee and a playlist that didn't quite match the landscape. Flat fields giving way to hills, giving way to mountains, giving way to cities stacked against the coast. The apartment would have been small. Somerville, probably. A triple-decker with uneven floors and radiators that clanged all night, and a landlord who fixed things slowly or not at all. Your bedroom window would have looked onto a street with more trees than Chicago ever had. Maples, oaks, trees that turned impossible colors in October. That version of you would have spent her first year learning to read film the way archaeologists read bone. You would have sat in dark rooms with reels of nitrate stock, wearing white cotton gloves, taking notes in a specific kind of pencil that didn't leave marks. The other students would have been intense in ways you weren't used to. People who'd been thinking about cinema since they were 12, who had opinions about aspect ratios and could argue for an hour about a single cut, who name-dropped directors you'd never heard of and seemed surprised when you didn't know what they were talking about. You would have felt behind at first, stupid sometimes, like you'd made a mistake coming here, like you didn't belong. Then you would have started to understand. Not everything, but enough. You would have learned the language. You would have had insights that surprised you. You would have stayed late in the lab working on a restoration and looked up and realized you'd lost 3 hours and hadn't thought about anything else. You would have felt capable, then occasionally brilliant. There would have been a professor, not the one who recommended you, someone else. She would have worked in silence mostly, hunched over a light table with a loupe, and when she looked up to explain something, her whole face would change. That version of you would have learned her rhythm, when to ask questions, when to just watch and absorb. You would have stayed late in the lab because she stayed late, and sometimes around 8 or 9 she'd order Thai food and you'd eat it sitting on the floor between shelves of film canisters. She would have talked about film the way other people talk about religion, with reverence and precision and occasional anger. She would have shown you a 5-second sequence from a silent film and explained why it mattered, and you would have seen it. Actually seen it. The way light moved across an actress's face, the way a cut created meaning. It wouldn't have been romantic. It would have been something else. Mentorship, maybe, or just recognition. She would have seen what you could do before you saw it yourself. She would have pushed you, not gently. The work would have been slow, painstaking. You would have spent 6 weeks on 2 minutes of footage from a film most people had never heard of. Frame by frame, you would have cleaned and stabilized and corrected. You would have learned patience you didn't know you had. Weekends, that version of you would have walked to a coffee shop in Davis Square. She would have brought a book she was supposed to read for class and mostly watched people instead. Students from Tufts arguing about politics. Parents with small children. Old men reading newspapers in languages you didn't recognize. The light through the window would have been different than Chicago light. Sharper somehow. Cleaner. It would have taken you months to understand why. Something about the angle, the latitude, the way the city was built. You would have made one close friend, someone in your cohort who was just as overwhelmed as you were. Her name would have been Sarah or Emma or something simple. She would have been from the South, Georgia maybe, or North Carolina. She would have talked too fast when she was nervous, and you would have recognized yourself in that. You would have studied together at her apartment. You would have complained about the workload and the other students who seemed to already know everything. You would have gotten drunk on cheap wine and admitted you weren't sure you were smart enough for this. On bad days, you would have reminded each other why you were there. Because you loved film. Because this was a chance most people didn't get. because you could do this. But there would have been trade-offs. That version of you would have missed things. Your college roommate's wedding. You would have said you couldn't afford the flight, but really you just had too much work. Your nephew's first birthday. Your grandmother's 80th. The month your mom was sick with something that turned out to be nothing, but no one knew that at the time. You would have called home and felt the distance, not just miles. Your parents wouldn't have understood what you were doing. They would have tried. Your mom would have asked questions. What's film preservation? What do you do with it? How do you get a job? And you would have tried to explain and heard how it sounded. Abstract, impractical, nothing like the stable career they'd hoped for. Your dad would have asked when you were coming home, and you would have said you weren't sure. Holidays, maybe. Summer, if you could afford the flight. You would have been lonely sometimes. Boston lonely, which is different than Chicago lonely. The city would have felt closed in ways Chicago never did. Hard to enter. People would have had their groups already, their neighborhoods, their favorite bars. You would have spent Friday nights in your apartment with work you could have done Sunday because you didn't know where else to go. You would have tried. You would have gone to events. A reading at a bookstore. A screening at the Brattle. You would have stood in the back holding a beer you didn't want and tried to talk to strangers who seemed perfectly happy talking to each other. Some nights you would have walked home and wondered if you'd made a mistake. If you should have stayed in Chicago. If the scholarship was worth this. The program would have been 2 years. Then you would have needed to decide what came next. Museums, maybe. Teaching. Freelance restoration work that paid poorly but felt important. You would have applied to jobs all over the country. New York, Los Angeles, back to Chicago even, though there were fewer opportunities there. That version of you might have stayed on the East Coast, found a position at a museum in a city where you didn't know anyone. Or she might have come back to Chicago with a different resume and the same quiet uncertainty about what it all added up to. She would have had knowledge you don't have. She would have seen films you'll never see, touched prints that are decaying in climate-controlled rooms you'll never access. She would have learned a specific way of looking at images that changes how you see everything else. She would have gone to parties where people talked about their work with passion. She would have had expertise. She would have been someone people introduced as, she works in film preservation, and watched their faces shift with interest. But she wouldn't have had this apartment, these friends who know you well enough to know when you're lying about being fine. The owner of the Korean restaurant wouldn't know her face. She wouldn't have been here the night Katie called crying about her breakup before she met the man she's marrying now. She wouldn't have this small accumulation of 6 years that only matters because it's yours. You wonder sometimes which version got the better deal. Which one is happier? Which one feels more like the person you were supposed to become? But the question doesn't have an answer that helps. Both versions are real in their own way. Both versions are making do. You found the acceptance letter again last month. You were looking for your passport because you were thinking about taking a trip, nowhere specific, just away. And there it was, folded in half, tucked behind old bank statements and a warranty for a blender you don't even own anymore. You read it standing in your bedroom, the same words from 6 years ago. The department was pleased to offer you admission, full tuition waiver, annual stipend of $22,000, housing assistance available. Orientation would begin August 20th. You read the date and did the math. August 20th was a Thursday. You would have been 22. You try to remember what you were doing that day instead. Probably working at the nonprofit, which you'd started in July. Probably eating lunch at your desk. Probably coming home to an empty apartment and making pasta and watching something forgettable. You put the letter back in the drawer. Not hidden exactly, just away. The thing about the life you didn't live is that it stays perfect. It doesn't get tired or disappointed or ordinary. It doesn't wake up and make coffee the same way every morning and wonder if this is all there is. That version of you gets to stay ambitious. She gets to stay becoming. She never has to arrive at something and realize it's not what she thought it would be. This version of you is just here, updating grant databases, taking the same train, ordering the same soup, standing at the same kitchen counter every morning waiting for coffee to steep. But here is real. Here has weight. The Korean restaurant owner knows you like extra broth. She knows you come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She knows you always sit at the same table by the window. Your friend texts you photos of her dog without explanation or preamble. Just the dog. 15 photos. You text back a single heart, and she knows what you mean. Your mom calls on Sundays, and you talk about nothing. The weather, what she made for dinner, whether your brother's going to propose to his girlfriend. It's boring. It matters because you're there to answer. Last week, Maria asked if you wanted to come with her to meet a family she's been working with. They'd just moved into permanent housing after 2 years in a shelter. She thought you might want to see what the numbers actually meant. You went. You met the family. 2 kids, 7 and 9. The mom showed you their bedrooms with a pride that made your chest hurt. Maria had helped them get furniture. Someone else had donated dishes. Your grant writing had helped pay for the security deposit. You didn't say much. You felt like an imposter. But driving back, Maria said she was glad you came. She said sometimes she forgets that the people doing the paperwork are part of it too. You think about the scholarship less than you used to. Months go by without it crossing your mind. Then something shifts. A movie you watch that's beautifully shot. An article about film preservation. Someone mentioning Boston in passing. And there it is again. You've learned to let it pass. The wondering. The tallying of what might have been different. The fantasy version of yourself who made the other choice and became someone more interesting. You remind yourself that she would have had regrets too. Different ones, but just as real. She would have wondered about the job she didn't take. The relationship she left behind that might have been something. The city she left that maybe she should have stayed in. Tonight you stand at your kitchen counter, even though it's evening and you shouldn't have caffeine. The kettle boils. You spoon coffee into the press, 2 scoops, same as always, and pour the water and set your phone timer for 4 minutes. The apartment is quiet. Your roommate's gone until Sunday. Outside you can hear someone's music playing, a car alarm going off a few blocks away, the sounds of other people's Friday nights beginning. You stand there and wait. 4 minutes feels like enough time to notice things. The crack in the ceiling you keep forgetting to tell your landlord about. The way the light from the street comes through the window at an angle. The hum of the refrigerator that you only hear when everything else is quiet. The timer goes off. You press the plunger down slowly, watching the ground sink to the bottom. Steam rises and catches what's left of the evening light. You pour yourself a cup and stand there a moment longer, both hands wrapped around the warmth, feeling the heat seep into your palms. Outside, the streetlights are starting to come on. One by one, down the block, like a sequence you've seen before. Like something that happens every night, whether you watch it or not. You take your coffee to the window and stand there looking out at Ashland Avenue. Cars passing, people walking home. The same view you've had for 3 years. It's not enough, but it's yours. And tonight, that feels like something worth staying for.